All right. The recording has begun. I am your host, Greg Gaub. This is episode 34 of Worldwide Slot Car Chat on Zoom. If you've never joined us live, seriously, what? Why? Come on. If you can join us live, join us live. It's a whole lot of fun. The 2 hours passes momentarily when it's live, and it's just a joy, and especially a joy to see new faces and hear new perspectives and get new questions and things like that. So, again, if you're a offline watcher but you can attend a live meeting, don't be afraid. We won't bite hard. Anyways, so I do have some ideas for topics, and of course we will do show and tell and stuff. I've got something to show and tell. John has something to show and tell. I'm sure other people have show and tell. But I kind of wanted to start with a topic of sorts. It's going to be a hypothetical, although I'm going to talk about my friend. I am not my friend in this hypothetical. However, I could very well be in the same position very easily. So, a friend of mine who's very good with 3D modeling has another friend who they converse from time to time about various topics. And the other friend said, "Hey, we have the widget, right? But wouldn't it be cool if the widget did A and B? Wouldn't it be cool to have a widget that does A and B?" And my friend says, "Yeah, that'd be cool. Why isn't that out there already? I'll CAD that up. We'll see if we can make that happen." So my friend does the work, prints prototypes, does testing, develops widget that does A and B. And his friend is like, "Perfect. Well, close to perfect. What if it could do C also?" So my friend says, "Yeah, we can probably do that." So he does the design work and the CADing and the prototyping and stuff to make sure that the widget does A, B, and C. Now, my friend has a widget that is marketable widget, and it does A, B, and C. And there's currently no other product on the market that does A, B, and C. And so he's planning to bring that to market. Well, his friend decided that, hey, that's my idea. That's my product. I'm going to sell that product. Give that to me because it was my idea. And no, you that's not your idea. You can't sell that. It's my idea. I'm going to sell that. So I have my own opinion on this, of course, and I am not a lawyer. However, my layman's understanding of things is that my friend who did all the design work and prototyping and testing and development of the product has pretty much 100% claim on this product. At no point did his friend pay any money towards the cost of development or anything. It was just, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was this thing? So if my opinion isn't already clear, I would like to get some of your guys' opinions. Does anybody out there have a thought on this? John, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I know a little bit of a law up here in Canada, which is, but I don't know about laws in the States. But I mean, documentation is everything. If what you're basically showing is, your work. That's probably the most important thing. The other thing is give them a copy of the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and maybe they'll settle down. It's an unfortunate situation, but hopefully they're maybe not that good friends anymore. But I mean, to take something like this, like, it's going to cost them more in legal fees than perhaps they could even make, depending upon what the product is.
Now, what if a guy who had the idea had kludged together something that doesn't really do A and B, but is kind of like the thing that got him to think that it would be cool to have a widget that does A and B? Like he said, I'm going to make this widget do what I want in a kludgy way. But that's what brought him to the idea of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if it did A and B? His never really did A, B, or C.
Right.
But his kludge of a widget is what gave him the thought to say, wouldn't it be nice if there was a proper product that does these things?
Yeah, thoughts and wishes are nice, but
yeah, you can't sell thoughts and wishes.
Yeah.
No.
You want to expand on that, Dennis, or did I hear Chris?
No,
chime in?
I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So, I would think that the guy who had the ideas should be, if he wants to market that, he should be talking to the guy who did all the work about royalties or some kind of compensation for that work. Otherwise, the guy who did all the work should not at any point ever let those files out of his sight.
Yeah, and in some cases, maybe not this specifically, but in some cases, as soon as the product hits the market, somebody is gonna copy the idea.
Yeah, sure, unless you patented it.
Well, and even so, even if you have legal claim over it, doesn't mean that somebody's not going to make another copy.
The intellectual property is a kind of a difficult thing here, because the intellectual property on the idea belongs to one guy, but the intellectual property on the execution of the idea belongs to another guy. And so, whose intellectual property are you going to benefit from the most as you try to sell this thing?
Well, and the other basic principle too is that 50% of something's a hell of a lot better than 100% of nothing.
Correct. Yeah, I would. Yeah. So it's just crazy that they can't talk to each other about that.
Yeah, there's definitely a wall developed between the two as a result of that. The thing that kind of gives me my own personal opinion on the situation is, number one, the idea man. Everybody's an idea man. There's a 1,000,001 people out there who say, wouldn't it be cool if something did this, right? But the first person, the person who makes that thing do that is the person who deserves the credit and the accolades and the money. When we get right down to it, it's about the money. I suggested to him that maybe he kind of give the idea man a concession, like, okay, well, we can name it after you. We can say that this idea, the initial idea was yours, something. But it was like, no, he believes he deserves 100% of everything regarding this product. Leo?
This is the kind of thing that breaks up bands, isn't it? Where, one guy claims he's the songwriter and gets all the royalties, and the others think, well, wait a minute, we contributed something there, maybe just a small part, but we did contribute something and we're getting nothing. And then it goes to court, and then the decision tends to go on the basis of whether they actually contributed to the environment in which the song was developed. So it sounds like the same sort of thing, that there's an environment, i.e. the conversations, sitting in the pub or whatever, the conversations that led to the product being produced and ultimately published or offered for sale. And that environment was created by all the parties. So they just need to work out the percentage split, don't they? That's the only harmonious way ahead. I mean, one guy could say, right, it's 100% mine, I get all the royalties, I get all the profits, and then they never speak again, or they go to court. And as John said, a couple of days in court will wipe out all the profit and a lot more besides that.
Yeah, and then there's also the court of public opinion. I mean, you've got he could go to court and he could win and spend a lot of lawyer fees and other fees to win. But if the friend who came up with the ideas is able to convince enough people that he deserves all the credit and accolades and money for it, then the guy who actually did all the work isn't going to be able to sell. He's going to have hate for it. So it ends up a battle of wits, and who can convincingly lie about their side of it, or convince the public that they're in the right and the other guy's in the wrong better.
Greg, this has actually gone through the courts in one way or another. When I had my business, we related it to doing our computer graphics for the films we made, or graphic backgrounds, or anything that was done on a computer or by a designer, not the editing, that's another story. But it went through the court several times where you'd have a graphic animation that people could use various ways, whether it be for opening or titles or something like that. And the creator always won, whoever actually created it. Ideas come from all over the place. So usually the creator worked usually for a company, and a company, of course, employs the person, they would own all the rights. But a freelancer that did it and supplied it to whoever still owned all the rights, you know, even though there was nothing legal ever signed or put together when it went through the courts. Number one, he had it on his computer. He could pretty much prove he did it. And that's how it went. And several times this went through the courts. I would assume it would apply to whether it be 3D printing or any other graphic relating to a business.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is some precedent with even Ford. Ford actually shares patents with their engineers and employees.
You know,
Just to avoid
that,
situations like this.
yeah, that's a company's option though.
Right.
The creator within the boundaries of a company working for a salary does not own things that he created. An independent creator does. I've been involved in 2 or 3 of these cases, you know, for very complex animations we made, a couple for the NHRA and so on, a couple for the PGA, and we always won. They're very easy to steal, and for say a local corporation in some other city that's just making maybe a corporate video, they'll pop it in there for a Gucci looking opening, but they'll lose the lawsuit, you know. That's all there is to it, you know.
So, and it basically comes down to, you know, if the idea person paid the creator to create it, and they had some kind of agreement where I'm paying you to create this thing, therefore I want ownership of that thing. Without such an agreement, then there's no such thing. The creator is creating. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. It's no different than writing a script. If somebody lifts a few paragraphs out of a script, you don't have to copyright it or do anything. It's automatic. You wrote that script. You have copyright on it, you know, if you can prove you wrote it.
Does anybody else have any opinions or want to chime in on that before we move on?
I just think it's kind of sad that 2 friends got this far along in the process rather than having the discussion on how this was going to be handled. I can see it happening. It's just sad that 2 people that are supposedly friends got to this point.
Yeah, but it always works that way until there's money.
Yeah,
somebody, you know, then things change. You know,
yeah, is potential profit worth the friendship? You know, who knows?
Yeah,
One of them.
friends make bad partners. Pardon?
I was just going to say, was this developed on a web forum somewhere? As if I didn't kind of think which one. And if it was developed in public on a web forum, then that I would think has an effect on the ownership. Everybody in the forum could say, well, we provided the environment by providing a conversational forum for related subjects.
They didn't pay for it, and ideas don't mean anything. I mean, ideas are going to come from 1,000 directions.
Right.
So somebody physically makes it, it's that person's.
Yeah, even if you had 100 people giving their ideas and suggestions and things like that, it
doesn't matter.
If you put any actual work or money into it, then the person who put the work and therefore his money and time into it is.
How do you prove you had an idea? You know, I mean, it's.
In this case, I'm pretty sure it was all a private conversation. It wasn't public anywhere, but even so, I don't think the idea man has anything, you know, illegal. So it's really going to come down to, you know, who manages to get it produced, you know, and in the public eye first, and who manages at that point to convince the public that they deserve the sales rather than some other guy. That's why I encourage my friends to get it on the market.
All I can say, if it is a slot car product, someone stands to make tens of dollars.
We're not talking about a lot of money, that's for sure.
I mean, Greg, you know as well as I do, this is exactly what is going on to a great extent in 3D files for slot car printing.
Yeah.
And the same scenario is slowly sneaking into this hobby, you know, and it's the way it is.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, I said that your best bet is to, I mean, you've already done the work, and he already has the manufacturing capabilities. I said, get it on the market, print a bunch, promote it, sell it. You be the guy who is first to market, even if somebody else copies it at some later date, it's yours, right? People will know that this thing is originated by him. And then, because inevitably, even if it's really complicated, inevitably somebody will copy that, design it, and put it out for free, or even try to sell their own version of it.
Absolutely.
But seeing the guy whose name is on it as I was the first one to put this thing on the market is beneficial.
Yep.
Yeah. Without any proof, without patents, without any of the other stuff, first guy who has an object in his hand wins. So, if you go to court and one guy goes, here it is, and the other guy goes, I don't have one, but it's mine, the judge goes, well, this guy wins. Other than that, it's he said, she said, and nobody wins.
Yep. Well, I'm glad we're all in agreement then. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to toss in on that before we change subjects?
Yeah, just a little bit of a piggyback on what Steve said about the 3D printing. I was wondering, do you guys think any of these manufacturers will actually ever, at some point, instead of offering, say, finished cars for sale, perhaps offer files for sale for chassis and bodies?
Eventually. Shapeways sells the prints though. I mean, like
Area 50
their products on there, but you can't buy the files from Slotted.
Area 51 though they're selling the prints. I mean,
are they selling the files though?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
See, I was thinking more the
I'm waiting for the first guy to start putting files. I think will start to appear on eBay.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's going to begin.
I think even legit, not necessarily, people, taking files and selling them, even though they're not allowed to. I think in the future, companies like Slotted and what was the other one you just mentioned?
Whichever. Any of them.
Anyway, eventually, when 3D printing in general becomes more ubiquitous and more reliable for new people to get into, then they'll see the writing on the wall and say, yeah, we're not going to be selling prints because so many people can print. We're going to be selling files. And honestly, the sooner the better, because there's like almost no overhead for the files. Once it's drawn, then all they got to do is say, here, $5-10 for the file or whatever. And then you get people will download and people will pay for and download a file with the belief that at some point they'll print it and then never print it. I've done that myself.
How many slot car kits have you bought, resin kits that aren't built yet?
Me, none.
No.
Well, there's a precedent here with the music industry again, that when people started providing MP3 versions of songs, they give the file to one person, instantly it's all across the world. So same with STL files for digital 3D printing. So they need to sort out some sort of digital rights management for 3D printing files. Then they can be shared and licensed in the same way as Apple. You
need to take it one step further, because at this point, the music industry has gotten past their steel grip on CRM. Because, and like you're saying, at first, when MP3s first came out, the music industry was like, oh my God, the industry is going to die because of MP3s. Yeah, people shared the MP3s, but people also paid for the MP3s.
Yeah.
People would buy the CDs, pay for the MP3s. People nowadays are buying the CDs or record, vinyl is popular again, paying for MP3s on top of that, and paying for streaming services to listen to the MP3s they've already paid for and have in hard copy form.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and MP3 sharing, to me, I remembering it back in the day, which I'm sure you do too, always seemed like when you would make a mixtape, you'd record off the radio and share that cassette with your friends. It's the same thing. The music industry has been fine the whole time. I think STLs are the same. If you
Yeah.
Colt 3D is as Stephen very well knows, is a popular place to go buy model files from. When the files are a good quality file and ready to print on whatever printer, because the person who developed that file had that in mind, people will go pay for that. I'd be happy to go to Colt 3D and pay for a car model file, even if somebody surreptitiously sent me a free version of it, or I found a free version of it that was posted publicly on Thingiverse. If I found that same car model file by the original maker designer being sold, I'd pay for that even if I've already got the file, just because that person deserves it. And enough people in the world know and believe that the creator of a thing deserves payment for it. Yeah, there's going to be people sharing it and not caring about the money, but there's enough to keep the designers alive and continuing to do the designing and selling of digital files, that they can do that, and it'll work. I believe it'll work.
Yeah, I think we've all learned that you have to support the originator, or else the source dries up.
Yes.
And the other part too is that do the math and how long would it take you to create that file? So it's a lot less expensive to let the expert do it and enjoy, for a fee, the fruits of their labor.
Yeah. So I think companies who are selling printed bodies need to switch over to selling the files for other people to print as soon as possible. They're only delaying the inevitable, and they would probably sell more digital files than they do of the printed bodies, especially Shapeways. Shapeways is just way too expensive for it used to be the only way to get, a printed thing, but now you can buy a printer and filament and files for cheaper than a few prints from Shapeways. They're so crazy expensive. And I know why, because the technology that they use is very expensive technology. But most prints don't need to have that technology print them in the first place. It doesn't need to be a nylon.
I think the issue might be with downloadable and people who are selling STL files is the issues that have the quality control. Maybe in 5-10 years time that won't be an issue. You just pop it in and it's, I suppose, Star Trek technology, it all pops out and it's all nice and good. But at the moment you can imagine the level of complaints you would get from people who said, well, this came out and it looks like a dog's dinner and I paid money for it. Now, whilst that's not their fault, I don't know if the market's mature enough. Obviously, MP3s and MP4s are a slightly different kettle of fish because an MP3 will play in any compatible MP3 player, etc. And the DRM, the digital rights management, is also an interesting one. Back in the day when you used iTunes, all files were encrypted, if you like, but within weeks of that occurring, the software you could download on the internet and you could just batch process all your files through them, and you came out the other end with the DRM removed. So unless every printer company got together and they came up with a standard of how the encryption would work, and everybody incorporated that in the software, I couldn't really ever see that being a workable solution in the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's part of the maturation process of any product is uniformity, that they have to come to some level of standardization. You're absolutely right.
And it's getting there. One of the things that Prusa does on their new prusaprinters.org website, they're trying to become a file sharing thing like Thingiverse, and they've got quite a few people on there. One of the things that they encourage is for people to upload not only the files but also the printable G code. And as long as and of course they say the G code is for this kind of printer with this kind of nozzle with this kind of filament, so that you have a reasonable expectation that if you have the same printer and basically the same hardware, that you can download that G code and hit print and not have to worry about slicing it or anything, and you're going to get a good quality final product. Obviously, you can't just toss a Prusa printer on anybody's doorstep and have them do that successfully, but that's, like you said, is one step on the process to getting there. And like I said a long time ago, when somebody can go into Target and buy a 3D printer and filament and then go home with it and press down, heck, these machines might have a screen on that says, what do you want to print today? Oh, I want to print a figurine. Click. I want to print a Boba Fett. Click. Print. Yes, print. And then it makes the Boba Fett figurine. That's gonna, when we can buy printers from Target, I expect that's gonna be the level of simplicity that we're looking at.
Yeah, and also,
I want one of those ABC widgets.
I'll let you know when they're available.
but that's the practicality of a 3D printer. For example, like even knobs for your dryer or washer that break, and other parts that no one has to stock anymore physically. You just have the file. If it breaks, you print off a knob, and away you go.
So this is one of my most favorite things in the world right now. Although I don't use it much because I don't use headphones very much. This set of headphones, I printed this. So there's a company that sells this wonderful little kit, and it basically has plug-in wires, little foam pads, and the wires and the electronics. And I printed the yellow bit and the black bit and this yellow bit here, so I can print it in any material, any color I want. They provide the STL files for different design styles for the cap part, and they sell different colors of the kit. So you basically pay, I think it was after conversion, though shipping was unpleasant. The kit was maybe like $50-$60, right? And then I downloaded the files, and they even give you settings that you should use. They have pre-supported files, so you don't have to worry about putting in supports and stuff like that. And you just slap them on your slicing program and slice them and print them. And then
now to your point, Greg, in audio recording, which I do a fair bit of, that's what happens with plugins. So for example, if you want a Hammond B3 that was built in 1946 and you want that specific tone wheel sound, download it, boom. If you have a sequencer, there's your sound. So it's very, very similar to that. And I mean, sound is essentially 3D, but that's amazing. I mean, oh yeah, if you could print off a set of AKG K240s, man, I'm in.
I mean, obviously with headphones, the speaker element itself is a big factor, not just the printed things. But I'd like to see more of that just in general. And there's like an electric scooter company that makes a scooter kit with printed parts that printed parts for a scooter. You get the metal bits, and then
even as something as simple as Lego, like something similar to Lego, you just print the blocks off and away you go.
Yeah, I don't see Lego themselves ever doing that, but I can see other toy companies, entering the market with that kind of. I mean, obviously, there's already tons of Lego compatible files that you can print, but that's a good example. Toys of various kinds. Love printing toys. I'm playing with one right now.
But even guitar parts, like you try it, there's a point where vintage parts are really tough to get, and vintage plastic, my gosh, I've got some knobs on an old mixing board that are literally deteriorating because of the type of plastic they are. Now the board's fantastic because it's old, it's got a great analog sound to it, it processes really well, but you touch a knob and all of a sudden it's like sand coming off. It's really quite something. So that would be really helpful and wonderful too.
Yeah, just being able to print replacement knobs for things. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole Facebook group about functional 3D printing, and if you print a figurine, you get kick banned out of the group because they want to see you print. They want to see your pictures of brackets and knobs and things like that. That your printer just became invaluable in your household because it's making your life better through functionality fixes and improvements and things like that. Which is
every one of us that's printing slot car bodies is in that's making our lives a whole lot better, right, Steve?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
And to me, a slot car is functional 3D printing.
Yeah,
It is.
I like that new M1B you just done. That looked really nice.
Isn't that a pretty body?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
blue
that's
one?
like the very late version, the Riverside 66 or so.
I did add the flares to it.
Yeah, well, they had the flares. There's one of those races, I think it was in Atlanta that year, or maybe it was at Laguna Seca, where when it rained so badly, and they had those big flares on the back, and they had these skinny little rain tires on the car. It looked so silly with these tiny little skinny little rain tires on and these massive flares over the outside, hanging out over the outside of the car.
Was that the race that John Cannon won?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, because he had a new set of Firestone
Yeah.
wet weather tires that nobody else had. It came
Let
off
me-
a Formula One car, I seem to remember.
Let me know if you want the file, Dennis.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I want to get to Lance's question.
No question about that. Right?
Lance,
Yes, please. Anything that starts with MC, I want it.
Okay.
Lance put a
We have
question in the chat that I want
we
to
have-
get to.
We have 3 versions of the M1B.
Uh-huh.
You know, the pipes on top, the one you saw, the side. We got all the 4 versions of it.
I want them all.
No, eventually.
Let me read Lance's question real quick.
Okay.
Lance says, who are they saying has the STL files for 3D printing car bodies? So I'll let you get to that one, Steve. And then how do you know if the file is printable? Steve?
What was the first question?
Who are they saying has the STL files for 3D printing car bodies? So I'm thinking, he's talking about Colts 3D or Thingiverse or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's where they are right now, the commercial ones in the market. And after that, it's just relationships and friendships. And, the biggest problem 3D printing has for the hobbyists right now is good CAD guys that make slot car bodies. There just aren't that many. There's a bunch of us making okay files. And if you're willing to do a fair amount of work on them, which we are, because it's part of the hobby, for us, they're fine. But, Joe Blow that thinks he's going to get a file and he's going to print it, paint it and use it, it doesn't work that way yet. There just aren't enough good CAD guys. And the really good CAD guys are putting them on Cults 3D or GrabCAD and asking some money for them, and they should, they should. But the money they ask is kind of peanuts, $10-20. I mean, come on, But most of the time, the guys that are putting them up for that, it's a pretty good file. But what won't come with it are usually all the little parts you need. Can-Am car, you won't get the stacks and the inserts for the wheels. You'd have to dig those up, but those are all out there. It's
Steve, is there anybody in the car modeling world who's building files?
that we all know about, you mean?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not that I know of.
How do you mean the car modeling world?
So, well, for example, if you go on Fine Scale Modeler, for example, there's some folks that are doing amazing scratch builds in 1/24th of automobiles or 1/20th scale.
Yeah,
And I was
I mean,
wondering
there's
if
guys
there- Sorry.
there's Facebook pages and websites of guys building 3D printed models, if that's what you're asking.
No, what
Yeah.
could those files, if they're refined enough, be scaled down for our purpose?
Oh, sure. You just have to find who has them and how do you get them and does he want to give them up? Are they free or paid for? Did he do a massive amount of work to make it usable and fill it with Bondo, or did it work, right away? I mean, this stuff is all over the board right now, and that bluntly doesn't bother me a bit. I mean, I don't mind how much work I have to do on a file. I mean, it's a hobby. It's not a race, Other people would like a printable file and they would like it to be pretty nice right away. I could point to a guy right here in the forum.
Well, I mean,
you want them to be fairly, plug and play, as we say. And that's fine. That's where you are,
they're out there. And like the Colts 3D ones, you sent me some files to take a look at. And, some of them are like you're talking about. They're going to take some work after the printing is done. And this addresses Lance's other question. After the print comes off the printer, there's still some work to be done. Not just getting rid of layer lines that might be obvious, but, facets and smooshiness and emptiness and stuff. Like I'll show in my show later on, but the file that I first printed, the car body that I printed on my resin printer, aside from issues that arose because I didn't bother to spend time putting supports in the right places, there was a big hole in the side of the car, and after investigating the file more closely, it's because there's a roundish element on the side runners that is so thin at the borders of this round shape that it falls away from the model. And there are things that you can do to compensate for that in modeling, but in a resin printer, it just never printed. In a filament printer, it wouldn't be laying directly on another layer as it should. It would just be kind of right above it. So it would still fall down and stick to that. So you'd still end up with a successful filament print.
Was that the Mclaren Elva?
That was the Elva, yeah. And I did some,
which prints just fine on good old PLA printer.
on a filament printer, and that's why when I saw the hole, because when you look at the model, there's no hole. It's just it's just a roundish element. And so when I saw that hole in my resin print, I'm like, what the frick happened to that?
I'll be damned.
I took a closer look at it, and there's just an oddity. And so I ran the file through the NetFab, which is a mesh fixer.
Sure.
And so it corrected that, but it's still the area around that shape is still super, super thin. So in order for me to, when I looked at the slice, basically there was air around that. If I had printed it, it probably would have succeeded, because even though there was air, it was a very small amount, right? So it would have kept printing that shape and not known the difference. And I could compensate for that with a tweak in the settings of the slicer to make it so that there was no air there. But then I'm like, well, do I really want to print this file anyways? Which leads me back to the beginning of this when I'm complaining about the Elva, but some of the files you sent over are just, I mean, clearly they were designed by a capable CAD technician who loves his model cars, and beautiful, straight, sleek lines, all the right curves in all the right places, no gaps, no bumpiness or whatever like that. Those kind of files would pretty much be paint ready coming off a resin printer, and even most filament printers be paint ready. But like the Elva, for example, probably not paint ready right off the printer.
No.
Yeah. So that kind of that answers Lance's question. Some models would be paint ready because they were prepared for 3D printing, or they were designed in the beginning in a CAD software, and some models not paint ready right off the printer because they were 3D scans that somebody shelled, or taken from a video game file that somebody shelled or whatever, and they're still kind of imperfect, and they would need more work when they come out.
And unfortunately, that's most of the files now, are somewhere in between. But it's going to slowly change. Everything's getting simpler and simpler and simpler. We know that.
You're going to have car enthusiasts who learn CAD, and you're going to have CAD enthusiasts who get into cars, and then we're going to have more paint ready files right off the printer as time goes by.
Well, 10 years ago, we would not be having this conversation.
Not 10, try like 5.
5, yeah.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Maybe 3. I mean, it's just, this is a pretty early technology for the consumer at some level,
Yeah, and that's the challenge of being, an early adopter at the bleeding edge.
It's sure fun though. Like Dennis was saying, it's rejuvenated the hobby for several of us, especially during this virus thing when we, have days and days on end to kill. So it's been wonderful for that. And it's a whole new aspect, and I don't mind working on half-ass files. It doesn't bother me particularly, so.
You want to see my Elva print?
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe a print his own. Yeah.
Maybe I exaggerated a little bit. It's not the end of the world. Let me bring that up here. That's not the right one.
Greg, how do you compare the detailing? The detailing on, well, that doesn't look bad from what I can see.
This is the side that wasn't properly supported, so it's all smooshed.
Okay.
There's my supports.
Wow.
The smooshed side.
Boy, there's
the hole.
Boy, other than the hole.
No, in general, it looks good.
Nice
and smooth. I would. I am
Huh.
still of the opinion that resin is still going to beat out a filament printer when you're talking about paint ready off the printer print.
No,
May
no,
may I just
no.
interject for a minute? Your file actually has the spare wheel there. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Greg, there's no arguing that. I mean, well, my question on resin still is fine detail, but like, it's interesting to see those stacks came out pretty nice.
The stacks look great.
Yeah, and
see if I can
that's a tricky little place.
yeah, you can see, and can you see the layer lines there?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, so that would go away with a quick swipe of sandpaper. And
Yes.
as I mentioned previously, this is at the low resolution of the resin printer, so I could probably make those even less obvious with thinner layers if I wanted to. The only problem I have with this file, other than the big hole, I would print it again if I could fix the big hole, but because the original file was not to scale, and then to get it to scale, we had to tweak the dimensions.
Yep.
That spare is an egg. It's not even close to round. And I'm not a rivet counter, but when I saw that, I'm like, okay, that bugs me.
Well, no,
See if I can get it
This
round
means you've
round.
tweaked the width and not the length or something like that, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, to get the total length of the vehicle, the correct total length, and the width, the correct total width, and the height and everything, that spare got smooshed.
How long did that take to print, Greg?
I don't remember, 3 or 4 hours maybe.
That's
Wow. Oh, so that's the support that's underneath?
That the come on. That's what's that is what was supporting it, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it only so in a resin printer, it only has to support the edges and points that are not otherwise held on by anything. It doesn't have to support a structure that's large. A filament printer would have had to have a lot more in this center area to help hold the hood or whatever, for example.
Are all those supports included in the file, or do you have to add them?
Some file makers do include their own support. It's especially common in figurines, tabletop gaming figurines, to have pre-supported files, but no, that's usually added by the software that you use to slice it. You want to show something, Steve?
well, I was just looking. I don't think you can see them though. I mean, whoops. The tires are too dark. I mean, these are the Elvas, but you aren't going to be able to see the tires stayed round. This is scale.
That's not round.
Yeah, it is too. And so is this one.
It's better than mine was, but that's not round. Hold it straight to the camera.
Let's see if we can.
Yeah, that's not round, dude.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's
Yeah.
better than mine, but come on, that's not round.
Call him a nitpicker or
You get a ruler on both sides, and it'll be different.
All right.
Some guys you just can't make happy, can you?
No, I'm a bitcher and a moaner.
cut it out and put another one in there.
Exactly.
But, I mean, it's, it goes back to, was the file designed by somebody who A, knows how to CAD, and B, is a car lover enough to make sure that it starts out as the right length and width and height.
Yeah.
And
Well, and C, is he a racer or is he a modeler?
yeah,
Correct.
Because if he's a modeler, you're going to get something that's perfectly scale, and therefore a McLaren Elva is going to be tiny by comparison to an M6, which is tiny by comparison to an M8, right? Or is he a racer, which means that everything's going to be stretched a little so they're all the same width so that they fit the mechanicals that he wants to use. So now we're into the Thunder Slot versus Le Mans Miniatures or something kind of argument, right?
I mean,
Where the guys are making stuff that it looks great, it looks roughly in proportion, but it's not 1/32 scale anymore. It's like 1/29th scale in length and 1/30th scale in width, kind of thing.
Dennis, that's right. I mean, we try to do sidewinders because we race them, and to do a sidewinder, you need 57-ish bare minimum millimeters, and we end up adding that's why I put flares on the M1B.
Yeah.
I mean, to scale, that car is 55. 55, sidewinder doesn't fit. Flares gave me another 2 millimeters. Now I got a sidewinder in it. So
yeah.
it's out of scale by 3 millimeters.
And I mean, that's what Slotted have done. That's what NSR do. That's what Thunderslot do. That's what Fly did. And in the long run, as I say, if you're a racer, then it makes sense to do that because now you get a big variety of cars on the grid.
Yep.
But if you're a modeler, then some people get offended by that. You know?
We tried hard at the beginning to keep them all to scale. That was a purge a year ago, and slowly but surely it just wasn't happening. You know.
Yeah, I'm that way too. But of course I grew up with vacuum formed stuff and hardcore racing where everything was 64 millimeters wide, and that was the end of it. Right?
Okay.
And you know, and you built everything to 63.9999 millimeters wide, so that it would just pass through a set of calipers set to 64 millimeters. Right? You never got to anything. You know, you never wanted to be even a millimeter under what the rules allowed.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Different.
Well, I'll probably choose one of those files that start out a little nicer because I'm lazy. I just want to hit it with a can of spray paint when I'm done with it.
Yeah, when you find out which one of those is the easiest, let me know, and I'd like a copy of that one myself. I'm like you. I'm not these guys are.
Yeah, you see, you guys look for the easiest one. Steve looks for the prettiest one, and I looked for the widest one on the list. Right when we started talking about this proxy, I looked down the list and I thought, I know which one I want to do. The March 707, because that was the widest of all the cars, right? It was nearly a full 2 meters wide in full size. So that's going to be a big car.
That's my quickest car, Dennis. By the way, 3D printed. That's the quick. You know, I think I've got. Yeah, I got like 25 printed Can-Am cars.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the quickest one.
Dennis, it's funny you say that because when I looked at the models, I was Googling the cars.
Yeah.
And I agree. I thought that was the prettiest one. You picked it because it was the widest one.
Oh, yeah,
The prettiest one, but only like 2 guys had signed up at this point. I'm like, there's no way I'm picking the same car Dennis is and being the third guy on the list. With that many cars, there's no way. So I'm kind of stalling and delaying. They keep adding files.
Yeah.
More.
Well, I mean, I did pick it because it's the widest, but I also picked it because I do not have one in my collection.
Exactly.
In my cars at the moment, and it's one that I've always wanted to print. So, look at that.
He keeps kind of waffling as well because every time he prints a new one, he said, "This might be my new proxy car." But I haven't
Dennis,
decided.
those are all the different files I sent you.
So these are
that's Greg.
You sent me the same ones. So here's the Elva.
There's the Elva, and there's a listed Jag.
So I'm just zooming in on the Elva so you can see what I mean.
The oval wheel Elva, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it had to get, this is actually as he sent it. So that's fairly round, but it's after I changed it.
You can see the hole in the side too from here.
Yeah, so it's actually showing as solid, but it's a different shade because of the integrity of the mesh is not correct.
Yeah.
So that's what I look for when I'm looking at a file is odd colors like that indicate that there's a mesh problem. But if I, come on.
That was a pretty car. Here
we go.
The shape of that car was really nice.
So now it's sending out to be fixed, and then it's going to come back. Give it a few seconds here. Loading. Here we go. So that shade is going to disappear. All right. So now you can see that shape. That's the hole that appeared in my resin print. Now, if I slice that, which I should have gotten rid of all the other cars first, now it's going to take forever. I'll show you what I meant about so there's the airspace, right? So that happened because these areas are so thin that my nozzle can't print them. So then I went in and I turned on detect thin walls, which tells it to print something when there's anything. And now I'm going to reslice that. And even after doing this, there is still visible air around that circle shape. So you see that?
Mhm.
So if you had printed this like that, it probably would have been okay. It probably would have been successful. One of
It's
the
kind
tricks
of
that I
weird
use-
because on the full-size car, there's virtually no detail down there at all. It's just
Nothing.
basically the rocker panels that go underneath the car, and that's it.
Yep.
my guess is that that file came from a game, a video game skin.
It's
And
exactly where it came from.
yeah, so you would not have noticed it in the video game. It also had an imagery skin around the model, and so it
Yeah.
all blended together. You would not have seen it. It would have looked smooth in the video game. But one of the things that I can do in the slicer is what's called XY size compensation. So it's basically gonna bloat everything by a very small amount. So I'm only bloating things by 0.2 millimeters, which is half of a typical 0.4 millimeter nozzle. And then I slice it again, and that's going to become more full because I basically made those walls that much thicker, which makes it that much easier for the printer to print.
But now you're talking about filament printing, right?
There we go. So now it's still kind of there, but
Yeah.
that would totally be a successful print.
Mhm.
I haven't tried that in the resin slicer yet. I might
Yeah.
see if that's even a thing. But what I really wanted to show off was the other files. So let's get the Elva out the way. And
And I
just look at that Jaguar.
okay, now that's
Oh my God.
that's made by a really good CAD guy. The 2J next to it is made by a pretty good CAD guy. You know, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
And the next two are from games, or game files. Those two cars, both of them, were made by the same guy that did the Elva
The 712 Ferrari and a Lola
and the Lola.
260.
So
And I'm guessing that these were easier to kind of shell because they're relatively more consistent shapes.
Yeah, they're very square and flat.
Yeah,
that's correct.
even
That's correct.
these fenders are probably the messiest part, but they're even for the fenders, they're fairly simple as far as, you know, this is the curve and that's a kind of an X shape and stuff like that.
All the roundness and the curves are the very hard thing to do in making the models.
Yeah.
So the better you see a good CAD guy, the guy that made the 712 here and the Lola and the Elva would have a very hard, basically impossible time to make that lister. It's just not within his capabilities.
Yeah,
You know,
I
just would
wanted to
not-
print this just because it's so beautiful, but this doesn't qualify for the
no, but the 2J next to it does, and that is a good file.
yeah.
That lister shouldn't qualify for anything because it's left-hand drive.
There is.
Well, there it goes then. Elimination.
Yeah,
He's
you
right.
click one button and it's right-hand drive. I know, I printed mine that way.
You're not going to get one much simpler, Greg, than right there.
Yeah, and that's probably where I'm leaning. Are there any other files that have this kind of beauty, or is this pretty much the cream of the crop?
Is that the one for
No.
sale on?
No, I mean, there's not a lot much better. The
Yeah,
612,
that's
the
pretty nice.
612 file is wonderful, but the guy hasn't put it up for sale yet. I got an early one of that. We have a guy over in Europe who we're paying a little bit of money to build us a file. And then the deal we have is we won't then give that out because he then gets the rights to put it up for sale. And as soon as I told somebody on the forum that, I think yesterday on a message, on a private message, as soon as he puts it up for sale, then we can tell everybody where to go. You know, so there's 2 or 3 cars floating around like that, in about 4 more coming that I know everybody wants. But he hasn't got them up yet, and they'll be on GrabCAD and Cult 3D, and the 612 Ferrari 612P is one of those files. If that makes any sense.
When is the deadline for sending in the car?
Oh, it's sometime next
April.
year.
Oh, yeah.
It's a long way away.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it's like April right now, and I think Paul will change it to a little bit sooner, like somewhere in March or something, but this is a pretty flexible proxy. Where, if this proxy has done pretty much what we hoped it would do, and that's
Generating.
bring up a bunch of interest in 3D printing and show people, hey, really fairly viable and a lot of fun if it's kind of, in your lighthouse,
And at the very least, hopefully this kind of gets enough eyes on it that even the people without 3D printers, but who have either the resources or the skills or the ability to develop those skills, say, I want to jump into this market and start making 3D printable files.
That's the hope, So,
All right. Anybody else want to show something off?
I had a quick question for you, Greg.
For it.
To actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to try.
No, just one.
Just let me see if this works. I'm trying to do what I did last week using the phone. So it will come under the 8881 one. Can you see anything?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, hang on. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So you recognize this, Greg? This is a Lincoln barrier file that you put up.
Looks familiar.
Yeah. So this one was actually printed at this angle. I didn't notice at the time until I came back, and it printed actually pretty well. You can see that looks quite nice and quite clean. And if I flip it around, again, you can see how it's quite nice and quite clean. So what I wanted to ask was, I have two more that I printed. Now, this one was printed face down.
Yep.
So it came off the bed like that. Now, if you look at the back, the quality, you can't really see, but you can see lots of little textures and honeycombs or hexagons or whatever they are.
Yep.
And also the other side has come out a bit nicer, but it's still not very, very clear. And this one was printed the other way around, where
the main reason
like
the main reason I don't recommend printing them flat is because the hinge points are much weaker. If you bend it more than once or bend it opposite directions, they break much more easily. For whatever reason, when you print it standing up, and the hinge points can take some abuse before they break.
But that's because the filament's direction is different.
Yeah, and you've only got one layer of filament, or maybe two, depending on your settings, when you print it flat. But when you're printing it up, you basically have many, many, many layers of filament. So
but I understand that from the strength perspective, but again, you can't really see on the film. This print just looks so much cleaner.
It's gonna come down to how clean your bed is, what texture your print bed has on it. Your print is gonna take on the print bed side. Your print is gonna take on the texture of the bed. So if you've got one of those Ender 3 glass beds with the texture on it, that's gonna show through on that side of the print. And then the top layer quality is gonna be based on how well tuned your printer is to avoid blobs and bits and droppings and things, as well as how good your slicer is at making a nice smooth layer. There's a setting that's becoming more popular in some slicers that they usually call ironing, which is essentially on the top layer, it does a much thinner, narrower extrusion in a more consistent fashion to make it just a more continuous looking and feeling surface, so that you don't see quite so large extrusion lines. Basically does a whole lot like lawn mowing, kind of like slightly overlapping to make it just generally more smooth.
Okay, I need to have a look at that. Just one more question then. I printed this out the other day there, and the paint jobs of the hatch, as you can see, it's not a P30 P4, but it's, I think, maybe a slightly earlier kind of incarnation of it. So it's a very the model's come out okay. It's not brilliant, but it'll do for the very first attempt. So the question is, how do I work out what shell I need in order to put a motor and wheels and stuff in it?
Ask Steve.
I didn't understand. I couldn't understand the question.
The question is, so we have the shell. So how do I go about putting a pod underneath that so that I can, have axles and wheels and put a motor in it, etc.?
Boy, you mean the whole process, huh?
Well, the whole process. No, I mean, what should I measure, and how? I know you can get adjustable ones, but are there any guides or any advice?
Well, yeah, I would start with the wheelbase for sure, and what I do is I bring the adjustable wheelbase into Tinkercad. I bring the STL file of the car into Tinkercad. I meld them together in the program until drop a pod into the adjustable wheelbase and then line them all up till you've got where the axles are going to go in exactly in the center of the two wells. Then pull the body off and meld the adjustable chassis together. Now you have a chassis, the right wheelbase.
Okay, that makes sense. And how then would you attach that to the frame? Do you just use small screws, or do you have to weld in some sort of plastic supports, or how would you actually physically screw them together?
You know what? Go to the. Are you an HRW?
I'm not, no.
You need to be.
Yeah, get on HRW. Go. You'll see there a list of current proxies. That'll be easy to find. Under the 3D proxy, there's a build thread. And I put about 4 or 5 pictures of the 612 Ferrari up from print to finish. And you'll see exactly how the chassis prints and lines up. You'll also see exactly how the body posts are put in. I think it will help a lot.
I think I linked on last week's video, I put a link directly to the proxy forum. So if you just go back to last week's video and look in the comments, and you'll just be able to click that link and go straight to the 3D printed proxy forum on HRW. And then in there, you'll see the build threads and the rules threads and all that stuff. That
will really help. It'll really help. It's kind of tough to explain, over here with it, in front of everybody.
Sure, yeah. No, I appreciate the advice. Lining the wheels up, I guess, is, I suppose, the obvious place to start. I don't certainly want to have to print one. I was hoping I could maybe just buy an off-the-shelf one just to start with.
Yeah, I mean, you could go to Pendles and get stuff from them, PCSs or Slot Classics, or if you're looking for simple adjustable chassis, then there are a couple out there that are real easy to do, but you'll still have to make some sort of body posts to screw them in. And usually you could either print the posts themselves with a little bit of some kind of support at the bottom, so that you, or at the top, so that you can glue that to the inside, or just some styrene tubing. A couple of pieces of styrene tubing that are telescoped into one another, so that it's thick enough that you can glue it in, and then take a self-tap and screw. It's not a terribly difficult thing to do.
Slaughter used to make the HRS and HRS2 chassis that come with pegs or whatever that you glue to the side of the car.
That would be another good way of doing it.
Yeah, that was the first custom car that I built, was an HRS on like a Skelex, an SCX body that I needed to put a slotted chassis under. That's just HRS. That was fairly easy way to do it.
Some of my favorite cars are done exactly that way.
Well, I gotta leave for the day, so I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks for coming, Steve.
Good talking to you, Steve.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, good listening to you.
Put a link of the slotted chassis, just the name of the story in the chat, and so I can have a look. And it seems to kind of confuse me a little bit when
Slotteds are called HRS, HRS2, in fact, nowadays.
HRS2.
Yeah, and you can buy them in all kinds of pieces. You could buy it as a complete chassis with a pod and a motor and wheels and the whole deal, or you can just buy the parts. There are lots of different ways of doing it.
Yeah, I can see these on Pendles now. Okay, great.
If you're doing your first one, I would say, unless you already have a spares box full of all kinds of wheels, axles, motors, and gears and stuff like that, just get a ready to run HRS chassis or HRS2 chassis, and then slap it under your body. Go ahead, Leo.
Just going to say, for Gordon's benefit, for resin-bodied cars, this is a resin-bodied Lancia D24. What I tend to do is use Britain's hay bales. So Britain's, the Farm Toys series, they produce little plastic blocks. Can you see that? Little plastic blocks which are sort of fairly robust, and will take you can drill into it and drill a self-tapper into it. And what I do is just basically glue that in at the back, Can you see that? So I glued it at the back of the body, and it would act as a mount for the back end of a chassis, be it the PCS type that Greg mentioned, or others. So you can do that, and at the front, I might use a small, a part of one of these blocks, that's about half of one or a third, and glue it at the front for the front mounting. And there's
Very clever. Yes. Okay.
So that's an easy way.
A chunk of plastic of some sort. One of the resin I got had clearly hand molded in chunks of whatever before they cast the resin. They basically stuck a blob of plasticine or something onto the milliput, yeah, and then they cast that as part of the shell.
Yeah,
that's a good example.
Yeah, that looks interesting. That's an interesting picture. Yeah.
Tell us about that, Chris.
Well, just this one had sort of the one at the back is a made body post. Just using some styrene tubing, and then I just glued on a little leg. But as Dennis was talking about telescope, this was a Strombecker and had 3 sort of tubes in there already, but I just filled them up. But you just get some styrene tubing and glue it on, and away you go. Not that hard.
Or you can use styrene blocks like this as well.
Yeah, you can. Depends how heavy you want to make your car.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just depends on what you want to do. Exactly.
Leo, I had a chat with Alexis in Greece, and he has those 2 different sizes of tubes. One, the thicker one you stick to the body, and the thinner one you stick to the chassis, and then you're going to adjust your ride height. When you get it perfect, you sort of you stick one inside the other, and then you get your screw hole through into the smaller diameter one.
Yep.
That was quite a clever way of adjusting ride height, because when I first scratch built, I bought all the bits, but you know what I mean. I just couldn't get the ride height right, so it took a few goes, but I got there in the end with help from Alexis.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it, trial and error. Quick fix, what Chris showed is obviously the gold solution. Meanwhile, somewhere the lead solution, these glue in quite easily and are really quick to sort of settle in, and they're not too heavy. So yeah, it's whatever works for you, something.
Plus, they take a fair bit of abuse, don't they? They're not going to sort of disintegrate in the first shunt.
Yeah.
And whatever works, that's the important thing. So look around for bits and stuff that you can glue in there and drill into.
Yeah, that's one way of, there are more ways of doing this than there are of killing cats, I'm sure.
Cats? Why cats?
Skinning cats. I mean, because that's
John loves cats. Now we know.
So do I. It's just a figure of speech.
Dennis, I'm curious on your 3D proxy build. Are you going to model your body mounting post into your body before you print it? Because that was my plan. I actually plan on integrating everything into the chassis and the body before I even print it.
I haven't really decided, Brian, because I still am thinking about how I'm going to do the chassis, and so whether I mold it whether I do it into the body or not is still up in the air. I haven't even thought of that yet. Okay. I'll probably print the body just the way the file is, just to see what it looks like, and then I'll look at that and decide whether I'm going to try. But the chances are that I may use a different way of doing things.
Yeah, I was just curious. I thought that was probably a good way to go. And then you could just tweak those posts to get the ride height perfect.
Oh, sure.
I mean, like I said, the few chassis I did on my own, I did that. I integrated everything into the print, and it worked out well.
Yeah.
Everything lines up well. I didn't have to worry about the chassis being centered or something shifting while I was gluing it.
Normally we're not. Yeah.
What you and Chris are going to do on this 3D. Again, my background is all pretty much ready to run magnetic type stuff, flat chassis. And I'm curious to see what the brass guys are going to come up with on this 3D.
Yeah, the brass guys are going to come up with something not brass, right? So that's going to be interesting, and especially, of course, because the as those who must be obeyed in this proxy have already said no composite chassis, which means that all of my ideas about molding in little bosses and tubes and things and pushing pieces of wire through them and so on have already been outlawed. So I'm going to have to find better ways of doing things. But in the long run, I'm still going to do something a little different to what everybody else is thinking about, for sure.
Do you think a pan type, brass type chassis printed would still work, or is it just not going to carry the weight?
It doesn't carry the weight, so it may not. And probably, if you just replicated in PLA what you do in brass, you're not going to have any kind of strength to it. So let alone the weight. I mean, it wouldn't carry the forces that are involved. I printed myself a little bracket the other day. I'm just trying to get my Creality, my slicer up so I can show it. But I basically took the brass bracket that I make, and I drew it up and I printed it size for size in PLA, and it's hopeless. It really is, right?
I was thinking you could probably use some of the ideas from brass chassis, like the not necessarily the rattle plate, but basically, isolating the body from the chassis by having a separate thing that the body holds onto, but is somehow trapped by the chassis but allowed to move.
Yeah. But can you see that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So that was what I drew up, and I drew that in Libre in the CAD system, and this is in Creality in the slicer to slice that. It looks fantastic, right? But it's only a millimeter thick at the along the faces. So when you actually look at it, that's part of why I put that little platform at the bottom there, so that it had some strength. And I put these little holes down the sides because I was figuring to push pieces of piano wire through there and then join it up to a front end. But this whole thing is still way too flexible for any kind of decent gear mesh. It'll chew its gears in no time if I put something inside that. But it looks pretty.
But would making that thicker and somehow diminish its functionality? I mean,
no, not really. Not really. I could make it thicker, yeah.
I mean,
at the time,
I had something similar in mind, but I was going to use carbon rods.
Yeah. At the time, I was just trying to go from something in my head to a drawing in my CAD system to a printable file, and it turned out pretty well. A couple of issues, of course, with the printing of it, like at the bottom here, where underneath these holes there is a very slight gap.
Yeah, you'd have to add a millimeter to that.
You can't even see, so I should add a little bit to it. But I wanted to have the rods right down at the bottom, right? So the printer has a little bit of trouble down there. But I guess if I put a raft under it, it might work better too. Because I just printed it straight on the plate, and that was not the best way to do it.
I mean, there's things you can do to make that into a more functional thing, but you'd have you have to brace that back top where the axle goes to keep it from spreading out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But even just changing the orientation, if you put the motor mount part down with the large hole in the two motor screws, if that was flat on your plate, that might clean up your small holes as well where you had your piano.
Yeah, sure. I can try all of those things. I was, as I say, I was just playing. I'm going to stop that share now and go and actually fetch the parts.
No, but that was a good example of how taking something that works in metal requires some changes in how it's designed when you're printing it in plastic. And even with the orientation thing, with those rod holes, your printer has to be just perfectly tuned to not fill that hole with little gubbins and stuff. You have to, ream it out or whatever. But the real question, I guess, Dennis, is: are you planning to continue you know, as a pet project for that little motor bracket, or just that was just some playtime?
Firstly, that was playtime. Secondly, I might continue it if I can get it right, and I could see that people might, you know, that other people might want that. I'm just changing cameras.
Oh yeah, that's tiny. It looks
Yeah,
so
it's
much
only
smaller.
it's three quarters of an inch wide, right?
Yeah.
And then, so these bottom edges, and this camera doesn't really even. There you go. It's struggling to focus. But it was just down at the bottom there that I struggled, and part of it was, as I say, because I printed it straight on, and I printed it with a brim, but I didn't print it with a raft under it, and so when I separated the model or the part from the brim, the definition between the edge of the part and the beginning of the brim wasn't very good, and so I actually broke some pieces off that should have stayed on the bracket, and they came off with the brim.
What I was gonna say is you could probably bulk up the outside of where that hole goes. You don't have to bring the rod up higher and add material below, but if you make the material that the hole goes through bigger, and when you push the rod through there, even if you can see a little rod on the bottom of the holder, it'll still have enough material to keep.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But yeah, that was much more of just a project to play with the whole process, and get a feel for what the material would do for me. But yeah, I'll be able to make that a whole lot thicker, and it'll probably work quite well as a 3D printed bracket.
I was gonna say you could make that thing 2 or 3 times as thick, and it still won't be as heavy as the brass one would be.
No, true. Yeah. Yeah. Talking of brass, do we want to move away from 3D prints yet, or are we still busy with that?
Anybody have any last minute 3D printing related questions before we move to brass? Too late. Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, this is on my building board at the moment. It's a 1/24th scale. It will be a Can-Am racer. It'll be under a TI-22 body. Just something that I'm building up for a customer with a slightly new design of pans. The outer sections of the chassis are 032 brass, and just one long piece from the front to the rear, and the body will mount on those. Now it's solid at the front, but at the rear it's loose, so there will be a little bit of movement at the rear there. You could see as I pick it up that part of the pan is loose, so it will allow a little bit of float on the body. And then the inset pieces there are 2 pieces of brass that are going to be hinged and just basically flop up and down with a very, very small amount of movement, just kind of like the old Renault inertial damper or mass damper that they used to have in their Formula One cars back when Alonso was driving for them the first time. I've actually tried this on a couple of cars. It works very nicely. So that's what's up on my bench today. And then the other thing that's on my bench today is this, which is an Osturero, Lotus
78
with Carlos Reutemann in it. This was the kit, and it's been ordered by a customer of Electric Dreams for his father, and so I've had to do all the building and painting.
Sorry, isn't that a 79?
79, I would think. Wasn't 78 the one that they banned?
No, that was the 80. That was the one with the 2 chassis. I think that's a 79 because the 78 had a radiator in the front of the nose.
Yeah, this is nothing there. Anyway, very nice kit. Lots and lots of lovely little detail. Maybe you could see the detail on the driver. The beautiful little the belts and everything was all decal, none of which would actually conform to the driver's body shape until I hit it with a hairdryer. Very nice.
isn't that a vac
Absolutely.
form?
Sorry?
Isn't that a vac form?
No, this is a resin body.
Really? What's the chassis?
Yeah.
Look
The chassis is a 3D print.
like? Oh, cool.
Unfortunately, as we were talking about it, you know, the 3D print chassis is very weak, particularly at the back. This car has very, very little support for the gears. And so I don't know how long those gears will last, but, you know, beautifully pretty in terms of details.
Very nice.
Very, very, very nice.
Absolutely, you know, pretty crappy kind of mechanicals. I'm afraid not. It's not a racer's car. It's a collector and a driver's car.
Are you putting a bite bar on the back of those pans on the Can-Am car, Dennis?
No.
You think? So
Well, no, there won't be a bite bar, but what there will be is right up against the. Let me see if I can do this somehow. Right up against the bracket in this area here. Right up against the bracket will be a piece of square tubing.
Okay, yeah.
And then inside the square tubing will be a piece of wire that comes out
yeah,
and bends at 90 degrees and holds the back of the pan so that it doesn't sag.
yeah. No, I was just.
And then all of the hinging for the floppy weight will be actually on the pan, front and rear. And then a little piece of wire across into a piece of square tubing here to support it and to control the movement.
Yeah, he's not done yet.
Yeah. No.
Well, we look forward to seeing that
Fortunately,
one.
yeah. Fortunately, you guys are not fools and children, so you can see a thing half done. So that's fine.
We'll definitely show it off when it's done and let us know.
Yeah,
how-
I'll have photos as soon as it's done, because by the time we meet again, it will be with the customer, with its new owner. And there's Russell.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Russ.
Your parts are on their way, Russell. The Scalextric parts for your old car, your old tin plate cars. Alan Schwartz in Baltimore has mailed them. So they haven't arrived here yet, but they're on their way.
I think that was an awesome. You're still muted, Russ.
Still muted.
Do you want me to yell louder?
Yeah,
That's awesome. I really appreciate it, Dennis.
that's good.
Yeah, the continuing
it.
saga of the rebuild of those cars is going to be something that past viewers are like, when are we going to hear more about the tin plate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, I've got to get back into that. But without the parts, it didn't really make much sense to do the rest of the work. So I've been catching up on a couple of other things, but I'm nearly there. So as soon as those parts arrive, I'll probably be ready to start building them in.
Awesome.
Good
Cool.
news.
So thankful, man.
You're welcome, mate.
All right. Does anybody have any other show and tell they want to show off? John, did you get your stuff? You're gonna go. You got it. You're still muted, so I can't hear you.
Yeah, I did actually. I'd pull out the Porsche I'm working on.
Awesome. Go for it.
So this is actually a Tomy kit. I can show you the box too if you want to see the box. There you go. So it's this wonderful little Tomy 1/32 scale Porsche 356A Speedster. And I think I showed the chassis last time, but I finally mated the chassis to the body using just solid square styrene. And just to make sure that everything lined up, I just taped the interior to the bodies in the right spot. And my goodness, it goes around the track really, really well. It's a lot of fun to drive. And there's a bit of, you can hear the rattle, a little bit of movement to it, which is nice. So there's, and again, it's nothing like, Dennis's or Chris's.
Wow, it looks pretty good from the underneath. You've been doing a bit of polishing there.
Yeah, I was doing that for you guys, actually. But yeah, so that's, it's got these pans here on the outside and then the central pan, and there's a wee bit of movement, but not very much.
Oh, that's all you need.
Yeah. So but the goal is to actually have the front trunk open and the rear hatch open. I'll put a little 1/32 scale Porsche engine in there. I think I'm probably going to try and vacuum form it, if not build it out of stock, because the kit comes with one, but it's made out of cast white metal, a little heavy. And then the front, of course, with the spare wheel, so you can open it up. So I'm anticipating that once it's built and the hinges are there, this thing will be flopping around like wings. So I'm trying to also think of some way to latch it down that would work as well. But it's a cool.
Small magnets work very, very well for latching those things down.
Ah, okay.
If you want them to open.
Right. Oh, that's a great idea.
Some of those little rare earth magnets you get from Radio Shack or such places.
Oh, okay. That's a very good idea. Okay, cool. But I mean,
or even a little bit of that magnetic fridge magnet stuff,
Oh, that you can sort of slice and maybe just put a wee bit of it in there with a little piece of metal somewhere.
Yep. Awesome.
But
you might try running it with the white metal engine in the back, because I'm serious, because of the lightweight of the whole car. That extra weight at the back may actually help it if it starts tipping over. I mean, the 1/24 scale hard body guys that I've raced now and then with, granted they're using foam tires, so they get a lot of grip. But a lot of those guys have built cars where the motor is behind the rear axle rather than in front of the rear axle, and the cars work surprisingly well.
Really?
Yeah, because they slide in the turns.
Ah, I might give that a go then. Cool, thank you. But it's such a lovely little body, and it's
beautiful.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
So it's smaller than an Inco 356, no doubt.
Yes. Yeah. And that's once this thing gets built, that's the next step, is to do a direct comparison as far as size and speed. But and it's a sidewinder, as you can see. I can show that to you. I think I showed the chassis last time, as I said. And that's just an 030 motor. And it, oh my gosh, it's just so much fun. Goes really well. So
cool.
There you go. Yeah. I'm done.
Anybody have any questions or suggestions for John before we move on? Hearing none.
Good job.
Nope.
Okay, I guess not. Well, does anybody else have any show and tell they want to bring up, or should I dig into my topics?
I have, if you guys have a minute.
Of course.
I actually dipped my toe into the dark side slightly this weekend with this little baby. I don't know if you guys can see that, how well.
A muzzler.
Yep.
Oh!
And I just dropped. NSR. And what I mean by the dark side, meaning I took the magnets out of it.
Woo!
Hey.
Well, you say that, but as you can see, it's back in there.
Oh,
We'll see.
Let me explain.
you can do it.
Couple things. It ran okay. Now I had purchased some lead sheet from Slot Car Corner, and I was playing with pulling the magnet and putting some lead sheeting in there, and it didn't go too bad. But I'm still learning cause and effect on the weight, as far as where I need to put weight depending on what the car is doing. So there's still a learning curve there. The magnet in here is half the size of what came with the car. I replaced that button magnet, so it does slide a little bit. I think the narrow magnet, it lets go a little sooner, but it's still recoverable when it slides, because it doesn't have to go to such an extreme before it lets go. But to me, and I'm hoping Dennis or Chris or one of the other guys, this is my first experience with these air ride wheels. And I can honestly say this, and rubber tires of this quality. I'm a little gun shy on truing these because they are so soft in the middle, and I don't have a razor. I'm still using, the flat block of material and gently lowering the body down. And I'm kind of worried about screwing these up. Any suggestions? And I remember Dennis at one point had showed some rims where he actually was gluing foam into the center portion of those and then truing it down to the same height as the ribs before he put his tires on.
I'm gonna say, cool your jets, Mr. Man.
Okay.
Start off learning how to drive the car without magnets.
Well,
Don't. Let me give you some tips. First off, don't go throwing a bunch of weight in that car. That car really doesn't need a bunch of weight, especially when you're not trying to fix an issue. You're just trying to add weight. It doesn't need weight. Take the magnet out. Clean the tires with Roncinol or lighter fluid, or even Kingston, whatever, because the Kingston lighter fluid has oil that'll help keep the tire fresh. Generally speaking, you don't really need to true those tires unless you're at a heavy competition level. You can drive that car and have all kinds of fun just by taking the magnet out and cleaning the tires so they get that crazy NSR grip. And you're on Scalextric Sport Track, right?
correct.
So you don't need to sand them or true them or oil them or anything. Just clean them with lighter fluid, take the magnet out, drive. Remember that you're not trying to get the car to act like a magnet car. You're trying to reprogram your trigger finger to drive a non-magnet car. Eventually you're going to get to that point where you're going to want to true things like that. And at that point, then you're going to start, being gentle with the tires. If you really want to jump into truing those tires, you got to be super, super gentle. Just keep it super gentle, like barely touching it at all, kind of gentle. Like, why am I bothering to hold the tires here if it's not actually doing anything, kind of gentle? That's my take on it. I'll let Dennis.
As far as out of round, but I did have to glue them. I used Dennis's trick of using the toothpick with a little bit of super glue going around the outer rim there. That worked real well, because going around a hard corner, it would throw a tire, literally.
Yeah, that's never a bad idea.
I did clean them, and I think it was Dennis or Chris suggested suntan lotion to increase. The grip is great. It is. The first time I put it on the track, it set the track record by 0.3 of a second. It's a little harder to drive than my Slottits are, and I think that has to do more with the motor than anything, because I actually found, going back to my old Parma 25 ohm controller versus my Professor motor 30 ohms, it was a little bit more sensitive on the trigger. I had to go almost half throttle with my Professor motor controller just to get the car to move. Once it was moving, it was a different story.
Or turn the voltage down, because I'm pretty sure those Moslers come with like a 27K or even faster.
No,
It's a King 21 Evo.
21.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Racer Revo
The
one.
problem with them is that they have a massive amount of torque.
Yeah, 350 grams of torque, 21,400 RPM. So it was a little bit different to drive, and I think maybe that's why the lower ohm controller was a little bit nicer on it.
Mm-hmm.
Pod, I just have a little bit loose. I'm not going crazy with it. I was trying to make small adjustments, but I'll take your suggestion. I'll go ahead and I'll just pull the magnet again. It's easy enough to pull, so that's why I didn't mind putting it back in to get my fix.
Well, I'm just one voice. Let Dennis and the other guys have their input.
Like I said, I'm still trying to learn cause and effect. If I do one thing, and depending on what the car is doing, what do I need to do to correct it? So I'm still in that learning curve there. I need to do a little bit more reading, but I did dip my toe.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, you can always get
one
one of
thing you might
these.
find, one thing you might find about a magnet is if you come off the throttle before the bend, it'll coast much better through the bend. Then you can hit the gas when it's straight. It's that funny balance you got to try and work out. It took me ages to work that out.
Yeah, that is my preferred technique. I actually have variable brakes built into my
Throttle
station. And even with the Slottits, I tend to tune it back a little bit, where I'm getting out of the throttle before the curve and coasting about a third to halfway through, and then getting back on the throttle. So
it took me a long time to work that out. Yeah.
Because this thing's got incredible brakes. If you just let off, it comes to a screeching halt, especially with the magnet in it.
I think Petrucci has something he wants to throw in for you. Go ahead, Mr. Petrucci.
You can always get one of these to get the balance of the car and get it all set up square. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be pretty good. I haven't used it myself yet, but
Well, you can send it to me and I'll try it out for you.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
obviously always, I mean, an NSR as it comes out of the box, because they don't over tighten any of the screws on the pods and the body,
It was
are
horrible.
generally pretty flat and sit on their wheels quite nicely. But you can put it on a board and just make sure by picking up individual wheel that that the car is roughly balanced left to right. Otherwise, what Greg was saying is very, very good basic start. The lighter fluid is going to give you a little bit more traction out of the tire than the suntan lotion will, but it may not last as long. But I would start with the lighter fluid. Put a little bit on put your finger inside a rag and wet your finger, wet the rag on your finger, and actually rub it into the tire like that. You almost get quite a shiny surface when you're done, and run it like that. And obviously, the more you run with rubber on the track, the better it's going to get, because the rubber tires leave rubber. And so you should be getting better and better traction.
Yeah, because most of what I run, most of the cars when I buy them, I replace them with Paul gauge urethanes. I do have a few that have silicones. So rubber tires that I have would
I've got to
generally-
leave you guys. I'll see you next week.
See you.
All right, thank
See
you,
you,
sir.
Mr.
See you next week.
See ya.
So the NSR rubber tires do have me intrigued. I'm actually going to look and see what else is out there for maybe some of my other cars. And because if I happen to get seduced severely by the dark side, I may have to buy some new tires.
NSR make most of their tires in a couple of different compounds. What comes on the kits is what they call a super grip, and then there are ultra grips, which are more grippy than the stock ones. And I'm not sure whether they still make the extreme grip or not, but they were so soft that they really were terribly gummy. I tend to stick with super grips and ultra grips. Slotted make other compounds of tire other than their stock tire as well. The one that works really well for me there is anything in the N22 compound. It grinds it grinds nicely, and it gives good grip as well.
Now, would you suggest that for which one for rubber track on for Scale Electric's track on the NSRs? The ultra grips probably sufficient?
The super grips are probably sufficient right now. The stuff that's on the car.
Okay, so super grip is the standard. Ultra grip
Yeah,
is that.
and they last a lot longer, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the traction was phenomenal. I'll give it that. I mean, even when I first pulled the magnet, I didn't even put the body back on it. I just set the chassis down and tried to just to see if I could get it around the track. And down the straightaway, it was no problem. I mean, getting into those curves, I guess understeer would be the best way to describe what was happening. It was hard to get it around the corner. But again, I hadn't done a whole lot of adjusting on the front end at that point. The car came, none of the Allen screws were adjusted. The front axle was horrible the way it came out of the box.
Yeah, they're always sloppy because they don't know what kind of track you're running on.
Right. So once I got that adjusted well, and then it started to do a little better. I did leave a little bit of lead weight. I put 2 slivers on the nose up in here on the chassis, just to add a little weight to the front end on that guide.
Was it popping out?
It seemed like it was to me. It seemed like a good idea.
Sometimes, sometimes as you accelerate, it's lifting the front. If that's the case, then a little bit of weight up front is necessary. But
Well,
don't think that putting weight up front is going to, is going to give you more traction at the front. It doesn't.
Yeah, my first NSR car was a revelation, pretty much the same revelation that you're having, Brian, is that the grip compared to what I was used to with Scale Electric and SCX and all the other toy brands was just unreal. And so I was always wheeling out of the slot and wanting to make it heavier up front. And eventually I learned to be a little bit more conservative with my trigger action, especially off the start. And then with your understeer that you're talking about, it's because there's so much grip, the car is going to tend to tip a little bit before it slides sometimes. And so it's going to tip just the tiniest bit, enough for the guide to come out and then just drive straight on. So sometimes there's too much grip. I made a video with my first NSR car too much grip on my YouTube, and it basically is me pulling the trigger and the car going bring, 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 and then stopping because the guide wasn't in the slot anymore. I was amazed that there was such a compound that could even do that. But I never noticed a real big difference traction-wise on Scalextric Sport Track between NSR's super grips or ultra grips. I don't think I ever had any extreme grips, but between the two, I never noticed a big difference. And my inexperience with tires, I find that the slotted N22 and N18 are more or less comparable to the NSR super grips and ultra grips. So if you want to get some tires that are similar, but not necessarily the NSR, then the slotted N22s, and because Scalextric is doing, with their latest models, they're doing compatible wheels, you can just do a straight swap with those slotted tires onto those wheels. And
my slotteds all run great. They ran great out of the box, and I'm still running stock tires on those. And
with the magnets, are you pulling the magnets on those yet?
I think I tried on one of the Alphas a long time ago, and that lasted about 8 seconds.
Yeah, their stock tires aren't nearly as grippy as NSR stock tires. So with the magnets, it makes more sense with their stock tires. But if you pull the magnets out and you clean the slotted stock tires with lighter fluid or suntan oil or whatever, they'll grip up a little bit as well. But then you can always
the newer slotted tires are better than stock tires are better than the early ones too.
Yeah. So
from when they started with the C1, and after that, the very latest, like the ones that are on the latest DTM cars, for example, actually very good. Yeah. Not quite where an N22 is, but they're way better than they used to be.
If you the slotted tires also, if you're not truing tires at this point, slotted tires tend to be out of the package a little more true, a little more consistent in their shape than NSRs. You can get some NSRs that are just absolutely hideous. So if you're not going to spend a lot of time truing them, I would probably suggest going with the slotted tires, only because you'll get a truer wheel and tire package that way. The best way, obviously, is to true them, and adding weight to the front of the car. You might have to do that because your front wheels and tires may not be true, and they could be bouncing the front of the car. So there's all kinds of little things you do. And as far as weight, generally the rule, there are some little bit of exceptions, but if you put the weight at the front of the car, you change the center of pressure to the guide, the front of the car. So that will keep the nose in, but as the center of pressure moves forward, you'll have less bite on the back of the car. So with the NSR cars, when they come with those honking great FK 180 motors, you really don't need too much weight on them. I think you need less weight on the back, but that's just my opinion on the thing. But a little bit of weight on the car, play around with it. The easiest thing for you to do is use the slotted aftermarket tires, either the N22s, N18s. They're much more consistent, and when you really need to want to go fast, you're going to have to true.
Well, I do typically true all my tires, but I'm doing it more old school. I'm not using a tire truer. I'm using 400 and 1000 grit on a flat surface and running the wheels in the chassis. And I'm careful, so I usually get pretty good results. I check with caliper to make sure I'm getting the sides even. It's just with these air ride wheels, as soft as that center is, I was just a little worried, if centripetal force is going to force that center out. And then while I'm, truing it, but when I shut it off, all of a sudden I have a low center. So I was just being cautious.
Yeah, if you're gonna true NSRs, I typically true mine at like 3 or 4 volts, very slow, you don't spin the hell out of the wheels so they balloon. So really slow. And if you're going to go with NSRs, the super grip is a lot easier to true than the ultra grip. So, and if you put a little oil or lighter fluid or whatever treatment on, to be honest with you, on a plastic track, you're really not going to notice that much difference in terms of the ultimate pace on the things. And I wouldn't worry about truing with not filling the gap in an air ride wheel. I mean, tons of guys have done that for centuries and centuries, but you got to go slow, and you got to, you know, when I use the Huddy or whatever tire truer I'm using, I turn the knob until the tire touches the drum. And then as soon as it touches, I turn the knob the other way and get the tire comes off. So I'm truing like for seconds at a time in terms of contact, because you don't want to overheat them and you don't want to gouge right through them. So if turn the voltage down, lighter pressure, and I wouldn't think you'd have any issues with needing to fill the center of the air ride.
Kind of a tap
Yeah.
type. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing to learn was patience, because they gum up so easily. If they heat up very quickly, they gum up very easily. So if you're not using the machine, definitely tap, tap, tap. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that, guys. I appreciate it.
And also any rubber tire that you're going to true, regardless of how you're going to true it, you're definitely going to need to glue the tire onto the rim, because it's just, if you don't, it's just going to grab and rip, and it's going to be a horrible mess.
Yeah, I mean, even yeah, like you were saying, when you say rubber, you mean hard tires, basically. So silicone, but urethane, you know, because if the tire isn't held firmly to the rim, even if you get it perfectly true during your truing process, when you start racing that hard, the tire is going to start shifting around that rim a little bit, and then it's not true anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and when you're truing urethanes, urethanes cut so nicely, and they're nice and dusty and stuff. So you can actually true a urethane if it's reasonably secure on the hub, if you do it lightly and smoothly. Rubber tires are just so bloody grabby on the grip that it, you know, I almost defy anybody to be able to touch a rubber tire spinning with sandpaper and not have it grip and rip and all over the place.
Yeah, it's definitely, whenever I have a Razer for my truing, and it's definitely just barely touching, no pressure at all.
Yeah.
And I wait for a while, and then tiniest little bit to take off another.
I normally go by my power supply, which has a built-in amp meter on it. So if my Huddy runs with no pressure all and draws 1 amp for the motor, I will not true more than an additional. So when I put the tire on the drum, I won't have it go any more over than 2 amps, which sort of is a mind thing for me. Really light, really quick. Just, and again, you're right. It's not something you're going to do in 30 seconds. Like it can take a while.
Question, please, on truing tires. For truing urethane tires, how should they look when the truing is complete? What sort of finish should there be? Should it be shiny or sort of rough?
Any time you can get a tire shiny, it means there's no gaps and pits in it. So gaps and pits, if you looked under a magnifying glass, they're like little teeth, which grab all the dust on your track and hang on to it.
Yeah. Right.
So in a perfect world, that's why the silicones initially are pretty good on plastic track, because they're non-porous tires, if you will. So the smoother and shinier you can get your tires, they will not pick up dust. So the surface of the tire remains on the track. That said, you can polish urethanes till the cows come home. And because they cut so easily, after about 5 or 10 laps, all that shiny surface on a urethane is gone anyway. because you take the body off your car after a night of racing with urethanes, and you see all the dust and all the crap up in the wheel wells. So, get them as good as you can get them, and that's about it. It definitely makes a difference with rubber tires.
Yeah, when I true urethane, I glue them on, I throw them on the truer, and I crank that sucker down like he's saying. They cut easy, they don't gum up unless
Right.
it's some weird concoction of urethane. But I can true a urethane down in it's not 30 seconds, but it's only a few minutes because you can go super hard with a urethane tire, and I don't worry about shininess at all. I get them round, I get them true all the way across and all the way around, and I'm done. I just put it back on the car and race.
It depends on what grade of paper you're using when you're grinding. If you're grinding with a relatively rough initial grind, then it's a good idea to use some finer and finer to get a finer surface. And then probably the last thing you want to do is with a very fine paper and some isopropyl alcohol is just polish the surface. Isopropyl alcohol works on the urethane the same way as the lighter fluid and other things work on rubber.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, what they say about it is, if you can polish the black back, then the tire is going to work best. Right.
Another good phrase. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis and Chris.
I haven't tried isopropyl on the urethanes. I'll have to give that a try.
Oh, it makes a big difference.
I usually go with the roughest surface that I can. So I'll use drywall sanding screen as my initial cut.
Oh yeah, that's
and then
fine.
I'm happy with it. The surface, I could probably use readers to see the divots and pits and teeth in those tires, and I'll run them like that. If they're round, I'm happy.
Yeah, it's alcohol. I was going to say it's alcohol that's used when you mix the urethane. That's what it basically evaporates to cure the urethane. So I don't know. I don't know if you can use too much, but you might want to be careful.
And after 20 laps or so, Greg, on a plastic track with a texture, all urethane tires are going to look like you can treat them up with isopropyl, and it's like putting lighter fluid on a rubber tire. For the first 2 laps, you'd think the thing's a bloody, like it just won't come off. After 10 or 20 laps, once the surface of the track is ground away the surface of the rubber, you're back to where you were anyway. So
yeah, and for me, when I put the car on the track polishes it. That's how rough my cuts are. I don't care.
No, absolutely.
Does that answer your question, Leo? Sufficiently? Excellent. Well, we're running down to the last 10 minutes. Russ, did you have something? Are you saying bye? Oh, okay. Let me spotlight you here. What you got?
I've got a Lola T70 Mark III Thunder Slot.
I see blue and yellow. I think I know what car I'm buying next.
So yeah, it was waiting for me when I got back from California.
Nice.
So
that's a wonderful little car.
Where'd you get that?
Yeah. Sorry?
Where'd you buy it from?
Cloverleaf.
Cloverleaf.
They're in Michigan?
They are in, here you go.
Michigan.
Yes.
I think they are in Michigan.
Yeah, they are. I've been there.
Do they have any more of those? I'm looking right now.
Yeah, they have good stock. It's good guys to buy from. Most of their local racing is all on silicon tires and all non-magnet, but they have I think a 4-lane Carrera and a 4 or 5-lane wood track in the store. They run the NSR National Championships each year, and they're the hosts for the Michigan 24-hour that runs once a year, usually in non-pandemic years. The guys involved is Art Roberts and Mike Stott. They're very nice, very approachable fellows. They know what they're talking about. They're hobbyists themselves. Good guys to deal with.
And any time I've ever called them, they've been like that.
Mhm.
Steve Sawtell over at Slot Car Corner, he's a real good guy too.
Oh yeah.
But
Super guy.
and I guess I'd like to try to pass it around. So I've been to Electric Dreams. I like them. Couple of years ago, they had a person that was doom and gloom. I mean, the bottom was falling out, the world was ending, there was no going to be any slot cars. And the girl, Kristen, I think,
Yeah.
she is like a breath of fresh air to them, I believe. I
When
don't
when
know.
were you last there?
Actually, at the physical building,
Yeah.
probably 8 years ago.
Oh, you won't
They
believe
had-
what it looks like now.
Oh, really?
No, it's
When-
beautiful now. We've redone the whole place. It's got a big track in it. It's bright and shiny. It's got lots and lots of showcases up, and you can
Wow.
browse all the cars. It's really
that-
nice.
I should
Beautiful
have
now.
went by there. My son's wedding was down in Cali. That's why I missed the last couple. But I know they're in El Segundo. The last time I was there, when you walked in to the front of the hangar, there was somebody had built a slot car track at one time, and it was kind of mountainous and stuff. It wasn't working, but it was, there and set up.
Yep.
That's the last time I've been.
Yeah, they're not in that building anymore. They're in a different building now. That track is still up front, and I have rebuilt it so that it actually works now.
Really?
But then there is a full 6-lane semi-commercial flat track, about a 100-foot track there as well. Go on their website and have a look, see, or their Facebook page. You'll see stuff there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
it's really, really nice.
Are you typically there?
I go. I spend a Thursday every week at Electric Dreams.
Okay.
Just helping out, doing technical stuff, car repairs. I have installed more digital chips in the last 6 weeks, I guess, than I'd ever done in my entire life. So I can install scale-electric digital chips into anything, and slotted digital chips into just about anything, and Carrera chips and Carson chips. And 6 months ago, I didn't even know what they were. I thought the chips came in a packet.
That's good to hear, because there's people
Yeah,
I'll remember to direct people to Electric Dreams for Dennis.
Actually, Dennis, aren't they properly called crisps?
Crisps.
Oh,
Yes.
it depends, right? Yeah. Down here, they're
Dennis.
called crisps. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the Herbie still at Electric Dreams?
Yes.
Herbie replica, right?
Yeah. As
okay.
you walk into the store now, on the left side, they've got a brand new door on the front. This big, beautiful, like a warehouse door that lifts up, but it's got glass panels in it. And as you walk through it, on the left side is the Chevy Monte Carlo from Days of Thunder, the mellow yellow car. The actual car stands there, and on the right-hand side of the building is the Herbie, the original actual Herbie that was used for the movie.
Right. Oh, I
And
thought it
then
was a
in
replica.
between the two is this big track, and then around the edges are all these beautiful showcases now, all with internal lights in them that are just shining down onto this massive collection of beautiful slot cars. It's
Wow.
visually, it's very, very nice. They put in a lot of good lighting. All the walls are painted in yellow and black, which is their corporate colors. The whole place looks great.
All right. So it's like an annex to the LA Slot Car Museum.
Except that the LA Slot Car Museum is in a completely different building in a completely different
yes.
area. They're not close to each other at all.
No.
The museum is on the property of the owner of both the museum and Electric Dreams.
Yeah.
It's on his home property up in the Hollywood Hills. And so that's a completely separate issue.
Cool. I'll have to get down there on a Thursday.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm always there on a Thursday between about 10 o'clock and 4:30 or so.
Okay.
Excuse me. Looks like Greg is checked out.
Actually, Dennis, have you noticed an uptick in activity for Electric Dreams with everything
It's
going on?
been very, very busy. Over the COVID period, it's just gotten busier and busier. As I say, I've been doing nothing. Last Thursday, I got there. I sat down at my desk at 10 o'clock at my workstation, and I fitted chips until 5 o'clock. It's nothing. I did nothing else all day.
Well, I see that it's an ill wind that doesn't blow some good, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, the hobby businesses in general, I think, have been doing pretty well this last while, and
I can certainly tell you that at least people have gotten in touch with me because they've rediscovered it, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's all cool. It's all cool.
Okay.
Thank you for attending Worldwide Slot Car Chat, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.